What's going on, folks? Ted from Immersion here, and if you missed it, the official character sheets for the D&D movie, I guess, gallery, if you will, have been released on D&D Beyond. I thought I would jump over here and we'd talk about it. So, as you can see here, these are claimable for free on D&D Beyond. So even if you only have an account and don't have a subscription, you should be able to claim these. This is similar to what we've seen with the Morden Canaan's compendiums that we've seen. But bring heroes and villains of D&D Honor Among Thieves to your table with the Thieves Gallery. This exclusive release presents characters from the films, such as Doric the Druid, as NPCs with stat blocks. This claim unlocks the content for Thieves Gallery for use with D&D Beyond toolset, including the supplement in digital form and game compendiums. We'll go ahead and click Claim Now, and now we'll have access to this. So this potentially may answer some questions folks have had regarding the movie and the characters. So all right, we have 6 characters. So we have the entire main party here, as well as Hugh Grant's character, who is the villain. So it says unusual attacks and magic. Some creatures have weapons that deal unusual damage types and spellcasting that functions in an atypical way. For example, Forge Fitzwilliam deals extra poison damage with his heavy crossbow. This extra damage isn't a feature of the weapon. Such an exception is a special feature of a stat block and represents how the creature uses its weapon or casts its spells. The exception has no effect on how a weapon or spell functions. So first up, we have Doric, the tiefling druid here. What's going to be interesting is we're going to probably see the owl bear transformation, which is the biggest kind of unique thing about said druid. Circle of the Moon has taught her to heed her primal instincts, so she's a Circle of the Moon druid and join the Emerald Enclave. All right. Here we go. She is challenge rating 5. Where's leather armor? Nothing crazy here. Is resistant to fire, even though I still recognize that she's a tiefling, but it just doesn't click in my head. Either way. Alright, Doric makes 2 shaped claws or sling attacks. So it looks like she can actually make claw attacks while in her tiefling form, not just in her animal form, which does a d8 plus 4, which is based off her wisdom modifier. She can also use her sling, which, as you can see here, is kind of this wrist-mounted device here, which is less of a sling and more of a slingshot. But either way, has the 30, 120. Is that longer than a traditional sling? I don't use slings very often. Does 2d4 plus 3 bludgeoning. Spellcasting here, we see a couple of spells: Animal Messenger, Beast Sense, Speak with Animals, Cure Wounds, and Tangle Fairy Fire Thunderwave. And then here it is: change shape 5 times a day. Doric magically transforms into a beast with a challenge rating of 3 or less, or into an owlbear. Again, a unique feature that we've seen in the trailers. She can remain in that form for up to 2 hours. She can choose weather equipment. Basically, so it's instead of wild shape, it's called change shape here, which is more of an NPC stat block version of it. But while transformed, her stat block is replaced by the block of that form, except she keeps her current hit points. So it basically functions like wild shape, though, right? Her hit point maximum. She keeps her current hit points. Oh. So this is like a weird blend. All right. So while she's transformed, her stat block is replaced by the stat of the form she chooses, except she keeps her current hit points, her hit point maximum, this bonus action, her alignment, and her intelligence, wisdom, and charisma scores. So it is something a little more unique. I believe this change shape feature we see in a couple of other creatures in the monster manual. So it's not a traditional wild shape, as it isn't a new unique block of hit points. It's kind of more similar to the 1D&D version. And then we have Fiery Rebuke 3 times per day. When damaged by a creature within 60 feet. This is like Hellish Rebuke, but they're calling it Fiery Rebuke instead, and does 3d10 fire damage to somebody who hits her 3 times per day, which again is a little bit longer, more frequent usage than a traditional tiefling would have. All right, then we have Edgin Darvis, which I think it's hilarious that they made the bard's name Edgin, but whatever. All right, so he is a bard. So here he does have spell casting, because I was very much under the impression that he would not have any spells of any kind. So I'm curious, because I didn't get that vibe from what we saw in the trailers or from interviews, but we see a variety of the skills you'd expect. Can make 2 reinforced lute or short sword, so it looks like he does have his lute is kind of hardened for battle in that it does a d8 plus 2 bludgeoning damage plus 2d10 thunder damage. That's actually a pretty substantially powerful hit for a melee weapon, and he could do 2 attacks. And his short sword also does thunder damage, so this just seems to be a function of his character. We have disorienting words as opposed to some of the other things we've seen. Can magically taunt up to 3 creatures within 60 feet. Each creature must make a wisdom saving throw or take 3d6 psychic damage and have disadvantage on the next attack roll it makes before the start of his next turn. And then a little bit of spell casting here: friends, message, charm person, disguise self, and suggestion. I will say that all of these spells are excuse me, are spells that he could use in the movie, and they could kind of play it off as just like a little bit of a. But it's not like this bard is casting Thunder Wave or using magical secrets to cast Lightning Bolt. He's using basically kind of persuasive magic in a way. And then inspiring words as a reaction. When a creature Edgin can see within 60 feet of himself fails an ability check, an attack roll, or saving throw, he grants that creature encouragement. They get a d8 to roll to that total. So interesting that his version of basically bardic inspiration is a reaction when they fail a check, as opposed to bonus action to grant it, and then they just kind of hang on to it. I will also say probably one of the biggest things you can take away from this yourself is look at the interesting, unique things they've done in the stat blocks and consider adding them to your game, right? Could a tiefling use Hellish Rebuke, maybe proficiency bonus times, which is what it seems to be here, because they can do it 3 times per day, possibly allowing them to attack in their base form with weapons, having, a reinforced loot period, which functions essentially like any other D8 weapon, doing bludgeoning damage, adding in extra thunder damage. I like this disorienting words, which is essentially a taunt, which is pretty cool. We have Forge Fitzwilliam. He is the villain of this. I think a former associate of some of the people in our party. He does not have a class, as we see here. It just says medium humanoid neutral evil. Challenge rating 8. While he isn't wearing armor, he adds his charisma modifier to his AC. If he hits a creature friendly to him with an attack roll, that attack is automatically a critical hit. This is, again, the duplicitous nature of a villain character. Has evasion, so he's rogue-esque. Can make 2 dagger attacks, 2 heavy crossbow attacks. Again, we saw they do extra poison damage. If you hit, it just does the poison damage, and they're poisoned until the end of his next turn. No saving throw. Again, and then hit or miss on the heavy crossbow. If the target is a creature, it has disadvantage on the next attack roll it makes before the start of his turn if they hit with the crossbow. We have Cunning as a bonus action, which is essentially Cunning action. And then Uncanny Dodge. So he's rogue without actually being typed as a rogue. And it's interesting that the poison damage is just a function of the character, which, again, is a thing you can do too, right? So if you're running a game and you want to beef up the power level of one of the monsters that your party is facing, but you don't want to give them, right? Because you don't want it to be like, this heavy crossbow does an extra 76 poison damage. Because in theory, if the party defeats him and then takes his crossbow, they now have a heavy crossbow that does 76 poison damage. So this could, again, just be a function of the character to allow the enemy in the fight they get into to be a little more threatening without actually having to give the party that extra amount of power. All right. We have Holga. Holga is a humanoid. So some people were telling me her ears were kind of pointed. They thought she was a dwarf. I was always under the impression that she's a human. But I don't think... did Doric say tiefling in the stat block? No, it doesn't actually say in the stat block. It just says medium humanoid druid. Okay. Let's see. Maybe it does say that she's a dwarf. She's an Uthgardt barbarian. Okay, so she's more than likely a human. It doesn't say anything specifically. Okay. So, it also doesn't list her as a barbarian typed here, whereas, interestingly enough, it listed Edgin as a bard and Doric as a druid, so not actually listed as a barbarian per se here. Damage resistance, she has lightning damage resistance by her Darksteel Great Axe. She has Reckless, which is essentially Reckless Attack, which is a barbarian feature. Okay. Special equipment, she carries a Darksteel Great Axe, a magic weapon that grants her resistance to lightning damage. All of the imagery of this axe in the movies in the trailers is like it's basically lava, so I'm curious why they decided to give her resistance to lightning damage, but all right. She does also get unarmored defense. And then just makes 3 attacks with the axe or with any improvised weapon or any combination. We do see the improvised weapons in the trailer of her using different things as weapons. So D12 plus 4 slashing, or the improvised weapon does a D6 plus 4 bludgeoning, and can also be thrown. And then has wrestle as a bonus action. She shoves a creature within 5 feet of herself. The creature must succeed on a DC 15 strength saving throw or be pushed 5 feet away. So interesting that they just didn't make this character a barbarian, because there's no mention of rage. There's no showing of rage damage. And I mean, there's literal, she's an Uthgard barbarian. There is literal, like, the Totem Warrior barbarian is perfectly designed to fit this. Very strange to me. I would have put my money on the fact that she would have been a barbarian. All right, let's go to Simon. Okay, so Simon, as you can see here, is a sorcerer. So that's confirmed. He's a descendant of elf and a legendary wizard. Oh, wait. Whoa, 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 whoa. He's Elminster's child? Or a descendant of Elminster? Wow. Okay, so I guess he's technically a half-elf, right? It says, though he's a descendant of an elf and the legendary wizard Elminster Almar, Simon's own sorceress wild magic runs uncontrolled through his veins. So he's a half-elf. Then I guess we have to, by, lineage, we would figure that out. Okay, descendant of Elminster. I didn't even realize, because I didn't realize Omar was his last name. I just knew his name was Simon. Okay. So we are a sorcerer here, a wild magic sorcerer. So Fey ancestry, all right, that tracks as he is a half-elf, right? Special equipment, he carries a bag of holding and 2 pairs of sending stones and a deathly token. We'll see what deathly token is here in a sec. When he takes 20 or more damage, his wild magic is different. When he takes 20 or more damage from a single source or takes damage from a critical hit, he must roll on the wild magic surge table. That's interesting. Because as it stands right now, if you've ever run a game or played as a wild magic sorcerer, you know the biggest downside to it is when a wild magic surge triggers, and if it triggers is very much dependent on whether the DM wants that to happen. This is interesting because it's tied to him taking damage, and it's sort of like a reactionary, like, cast a wild magic surge. So I like this. I think I would probably tack this wild magic surge stuff here onto the already existing mechanics of, like, when you do something and the DM can kind of roll it. This is pretty interesting, because this could be a really, the other downside is, right, you could get hit for 20 points of damage and then fireball your whole party and kill them. So consider that. All right, he makes 3 quarterstaff attacks or chaos bolt attacks. His quarterstaff basically does no damage because he has an 8 strength. However, it does do an additional 2d10 force damage. And then he has chaos bolt, as though the sorcerer spell, 2d10 plus 3, and then the damage type is randomly determined. And then spellcasting, roll a d6. On a roll, interesting here too, right? Roll a d6. On a roll of a 1, he must roll on the wild magic surge table in the player's handbook. On a roll of 2 or higher, he casts the spell normally. So this is a much more quantifiable mechanic. Roll a d6. If he rolls a 1, it triggers a surge on top of the taking damage. Let me know your thoughts and opinions. Do you think that this is a reasonable means for triggering wild magic surge? Is that too frequent every time you cast a spell? And then we can see his spells here. At will, Mage Hand, Minor Illusion, Prestidigitation, Speak with Dead. He must be holding the deadly token to cast this spell. All right, so that must be a magic item that lets him cast Speak with Dead. We see this in one of the trailers. Twice per day, Fog Cloud, Mage Armor, Magic Missile, Spider Climb, and once per day, Bigby's Hand and Major Image. And then as a Sheltering Shield 3 times per day. When Simon or another creature he can see within 10 feet of him would take damage, he conjures a shimmering 10-foot radius sphere of magical force centered on himself. Creatures inside the sphere have resistance to the damage that triggered this reaction. All right, that's an interesting, unique option there as well. It's kind of like shield, kind of like absorb elements, but I like that he can use it on allies. That's a pretty cool thing. I like that. You could make that a spell or just give that as an ability out to a player, maybe tied to a feat or a magic item. Here's some Simon art here. And then we have Sofina. This is the kind of one of the main villains here. As a red wizard of Thay, an elite practitioner of magic, Thay and Magocracy. All right, so what do we got here? She is a wizard. All right. Special equipment. She wears a magic robe that grants her a +2 to AC and a +1 bonus to saving throws. She can make 3 necrotic strikes as a multi-attack. They do 5d10 plus 5 necrotic damage. She is also challenge rating 15, so significant increase over the other characters. All right, and then she has a spell save DC of 18, at will, mage hand, message, prestidigitation. Twice a day, bestow curse, Bigby's hand, dimension door, mage armor, Odalux, resilient fierce, sphere, and thunderwave. Once per day, Evard's black tentacles, finger of death, and time stop. Once per day, she can also do swarm of meteors. She conjures, magically calls down a meteor swarm that detonates in four 40-foot radius spheres, each one centered on a point within a mile of herself. The spheres can overlap. Each creature in one or more of the spheres must make a DC 18 dex save or take 10d6 fire damage and 10d6 bludgeoning damage, half on a success. A creature in multiple spheres only takes the damage once. This is basically like meteor shower, but like crazy beefed up. I think we actually see this in one of the trailers as well. And then summon Wraith as a bonus action. She summons a Thayan Assassin. It appears as a Wraith. The summon Wraith appears in an unoccupied space within 60 feet. The Wraith takes its turn immediately after her. It lasts for an hour until she dies or she dismisses it. And then lastly, we have Xenk Yendar. He is our paladin here. And I think he's a human, right? Each night. He ages more slowly than a normal human, and this gift comes with the burden of perspective. His longevity has something to do with Zastam's nightmarish rise to power and Xenk's narrow escape from the Lich. Okay. So he is a human, sort of, with long life here. And then it says, the words neither virtue nor blade shall break are etched in celestial on the blade of his dagger sword. All right, so he's a paladin, as typed by, which makes sense. He does have an aura of protection, but for his aura protection, it gives his allies advantage on saving throws as opposed to his charisma modifier to their saving throws. He makes 3 dagger sword attacks and uses dagger sword flourish as his multi-attack. He can replace dagger sword flourish with cleansing touch if it's available. So, dagger sword. Choose the attack that corresponds to the dagger sword's current form. See dagger sword shift. Okay, this looks like a pretty interesting item. So, longsword. A d8 plus 4 slashing damage, plus a d12 radiant damage. Short sword and dagger. A d6 plus 4 piercing damage, plus a d12 radiant damage. Dagger sword flourish. Choose the option that corresponds to the dagger sword's current form. Longsword. Xenk magically detaches the longsword's blade from its hilt, launching the blade at a creature he can see within 30 feet. The target must make a DC 16 dex save. On a failure, it is impaled by the blade, taking 3d6 plus 4 piercing damage and is knocked prone. At the end of the current turn, the blade magically reattaches to its hilt. So you basically could attack 3 times and then launch this, and at the end of that turn, it flies back. Or if you're in short sword and dagger form, the flourish is he lashes out with both weapons. Each creature of his choice within 10 feet of him must make a DC 16 dex save. On a failure, the creature takes 2d6 piercing damage and has disadvantage on attack rolls until the start of his next turn. On a successful save, they take half damage and suffer no other effect. Then it has Cleansing Touch. Touches a creature within 5 feet of himself. They regain 68 hit points and gain the benefit of the Lesser Restoration spell. So this is kind of a condensed, distilled version of Lay on Hands, where it's giving healing, but rather than a set number of hit points, it's just a chunk of 68, plus also benefiting with Lesser Restoration. And then as a bonus action, he can shift the dagger sword from longsword form to short sword and dagger form. Interesting. That was, I'll be honest, that was the one I was most interested in seeing because I know of the dagger sword we've seen in the trailers. I'm also very curious to see what everyone thinks about the changes to at least Simon's wild magic surge abilities. Here you can see just some of the folks that were involved in it. And then again, just some standard text here about these characters. So this is pretty interesting. I like this. This is, honestly, I had anticipated seeing more of this kind of stuff. I actually thought we were going to see a whole adventure tie-in. At least we're getting some sort of content tied to the movie. I mean, we're in crunch time now, right? We're 24 days away or so from the movie being released. It's the end of this month at the very least, so we're only a couple weeks away from the movie coming out. And there really hasn't been a ton of push for this. There's been a couple of trailers here and there, right? That's big. We think it was a Super Bowl trailer as well. And like a couple of the action figures are now available in stores. I have a video coming out in the near future showing off some of the new like nerf and kind of play weapons that have come out as part of this. But I'm nice to see some sort of actual 5th edition content tied to the movie. And this will also help, I guess, maybe level set your thoughts about like, whoa, what is this ability? Why is his loot hitting people and dealing all this extra damage? How does he knock somebody out with just a loot? Well, it turns out the reason he can knock somebody out with a loot is because it's doing an extra 2d10 thunder damage that you didn't know about. But yeah, I'm also a little surprised at some of these choices. For example, the fact that Holga is just a person. Maybe over the course, you know what, this could be interesting. Maybe over the course of the movie, she'll like gain levels in like barbarian or fighter. That could be an interesting choice to see someone actually take on class levels in the movie. Um, I don't know. Maybe she'll like become buddy buddy with Xenk the paladin, and then take a level of paladin. I don't know. This could be very interesting to see. So I'm curious. Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. I'll see you all next time.